If it has been a struggle to trust the longevity of God's process for you, today's episode is for you. I have another incredible guest joining me to unpack this topic. But before we dive in, let us set the tone for today's timely discussion. Welcome back to all of the OG impact makers. Drop impact maker in the comments below if you have tuned into at least one other episode of the Seasons of Life podcast. And if you're new here, welcome to the Seasons of Life podcast, where we dive deep into discussions around biblical personal development and Christ-centered leadership. You see, our sole focus is to come alongside Christian women and develop the woman behind the many hats that they wear. In each episode, our goal is to start by acknowledging that many women have allowed their life experiences to define them for far too long. Instead, we can choose to acknowledge those life experiences, learn from them, and allow them to serve as stepping stones as we become the women God has predestined us to be. This process really invites each of us to do the work that is required of us to find freedom in Christ, to break free from strongholds, and to grow in spiritual maturity. In each episode, what we do is teach and equip women to navigate more effectively through seasons of your life using biblical principles and practical personal development strategies. I desire that every episode taught and every guest story that is shared points you back to the presence and redemptive work of God in and through your life. Today, I am so excited for our guest. Her name, if you do not know her, is Morgan Tracy J. Morgan is an empowerment speaker and the founder of His Daughter's Closet Ministries. I want to share with you that Morgan shares weekly faith-related videos over inside of her YouTube community, as well as blogs on faith, fashion, and fearlessness. And we're going to talk about some of those topics today. Morgan, I am so excited to welcome you to the Seasons of Life show. How are you doing today, sis?
I'm doing so good. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I shared with you before we got started, I have been connected with you virtually for some time. I was watching some of your YouTube videos and I'm like, God, you have been doing something so significant in this girl's life, in this young woman's life, in this lady's life. And I believe that her story needs to be shared in a different way than what I see here. And I want us to talk a little bit about faith. I want us to talk a little bit about fearlessness, but I want us to really have a conversation for other women who are struggling to walk in their faith and struggling to walk boldly in fearlessness. How does that sound?
That sounds good. Sounds right up my alley.
Yes, I thought so. So I was praying and I said, God, what exactly do you want us to talk about? And then I had to take a step back and I said, what do you want your daughters to hear in this season? What have they been praying to you for? And he revealed to me that we need to have a conversation about what it looks like to trust the longevity of God's process for you. And so I want to ask you, Morgan, what is one of the most common misconceptions about building a Christian brand or business today, from your perspective?
The most common misconceptions.
Yeah.
That you can run it like everyone else. Maybe that's one of them. Yeah.
Let's unpack.
Like you can run it.
Yeah, right. So we know that in scripture, it tells us to be in the world and not of the world. So with that misconception of thinking that we can just do the same thing that other people are doing, that's not the case. What is some additional insight that you can provide around that? Like, why do women fall into that category and find themselves in that issue? Yeah.
I honestly think it's just what we see. I've fallen into the category. That's how I learned about it, but I've even fallen into it where I've tried to run my ministry at times like something of the world, even some like business. I've tried to run mine a little different too. And the Lord had to really show me that this is not something, if you didn't build it, that means you can't break it down. But if you built this, you can break it down. And so that's the key here. When you're doing something in God, you never want to be the builder. You want God to have built that, because then that means you can come in and you can make the craziest mistakes and not do really well, but you never built it, so you can't break it.
Oh, that is so good. And it reminds me of a revelation I had years ago. It is so important that us as Christian business leaders, as if you're trying to build a Christian brand, it is so important that you begin to consult with the one who gave you your vision in the first place. I think that is so important, right? Because again, what happens with women I see is that when they don't know, when they don't necessarily have the blueprint, if they don't have the mentorship or the guidance, they just latch on to what's tangible, right? And that's what we see across social media many times. And so for you, Morgan, you mentioned there were periods of time in your journey where you fell into that. What was how did you actually navigate out of that? Because I think that's a big deal.
Well, I honestly think I still am. Honestly, I think it's a process. I think that there are times, like, for example, I want to do something for my ministry. Let's say I want to buy this one thing. It could be a $800 chair. And you know what the Lord will say? You're not buying that $800 chair.
Come on.
No, man, we're going to go get a little 200, 150 and call it a day. But you see, when I want to sometimes run it like a business, or like, oh, well, their office looks like this, or theirs looks, I can kind of start wanting to that same energy, that same creativity too, in a way. But I will say that I'm still navigating this. There are things I've wanted in the ministry, and really quickly the Lord would say, oh, that's your desire, not mine. I'm like, oh, okay. But see, that's the difference. And you run it not like something of the world. You are submitted to God's will, not just yours. I used to say, oh, I want the ministry to have a Escalade or a Tahoe. I used to really say that. And the Lord was like, why? Because are you going to be the one driving it? Like, ma'am, this doesn't add up to my plan for you. I want you to have a easy, simple car that's good on gas. Yes. And the ministry going to be good, because I'm going to take care of that. But that's all you need. So I will say this has been a journey for me. And there are times God still, let's just say, I'm still working through it, because I'm still human. There are things I desire and things I want to do in the ministry. And then really quickly, when I get in my alone time with the Lord, or when I submit that idea to God, God says, Morgan, that's you, not me.
And that is so big, right? Because we see people from the outside, right? So other people can look at you and, oh, well, she's doing this and she's killing it in this area, and I want to as well. And you just said the key word of you're still growing through the process. So it doesn't matter how big you get or how well known you are or who knows you. Yeah. At every single level, there's a learning curve. At every single level, there's some shedding that and transformative work that God does in and through our lives. That's what I hear you saying.
Definitely.
That is so good. And so with that, kind of what comes to my mind is the importance of trusting God's process. And so for you, what does trusting God's process actually look like for you?
I think it looks like submission. And it's like an everyday thing though, so the big key is submission. I can come in here all the time and have all these plans and things I'm going to do and we're working on it. I'm believing that. And then it's like, but when God shifts it, and when he says, do this or shift this, can you be submitted? And I think that's what trusting God's plan looks like. It looks like a true submission. And on top of that, though, it looks like submission is obedience. So let's say God says something. The other day, God spoke to me about doing something, and it really hit my pride. I'm like, God, if I ask for help, that makes me feel like I don't have it together. Ooh. It's like, I'm not worried about your pride. Do what I said to do. I gave you a word. Let's make it happen. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I always say, like, when you're submitted, then that journey looks really different. Now you're going to have highs and lows. You're going to be challenges, but you're submitted to the process of God. Like I always say, I never play the short game. Even years ago when I was on YouTube, I wasn't growing. I was doing these faith-based talks, and the natural hair care community was blowing up. And this was like 2015, 2016. And a part of me was like, do I need to go do natural hair care? Because everyone was wanting me in the comments, like, what's your hair story? Like everyone wanted me to kind of shift my content to natural hair care. But really quickly, the Lord said, let's play the long game. Can you talk about natural hair care for the next 10 years?
Come on.
I was like, not really. He said, but can you talk about me for the next 10 years?
Every day.
Yes, I can.
Every day.
Okay, then let's do it. You see what I'm saying? So even then, when there was only like a couple of hundred subscribers, I knew that I was playing for the long game. And so that's how you are submitted to God's plan. You are submitted, you're in submission, but you're also looking long game and not short game.
Again, you just hit it. And that actually leads into the next question I had for you, but I do want to camp out. You said submission and obedience. And that aligns so well with one of the lessons that God was teaching me over the last few years. And it was the understanding of surrender. And it was this process of, what does radical obedience look like, right? And so that process for you ladies as well, as you're tuning in, right? We want to make sure that we're giving you the practical steps that you can really take and apply to your life today at the end of this conversation. What it looks like for you to just respond in obedience is that conversation of yes and amen. When God gives you the instruction, move when he says move.
Come on.
And I think that's so important. And we're going to get into this of a little bit later about what it looks like to try and outpace God. And I wanted to like sprinkle that right here in this conversation for the ladies who are like, okay, but I heard God say this and I'm not seeing his promises. You said this, sis. You said, I'm in it for the long game. And that changes everything. And so I just want to ask you ladies, are you able, whatever you're focusing on right now, are you able to commit for the long game?
That's good.
With that, one of the things that I was, again, going back to the prayer leading up to our conversation, I said, God, what's different about her? I know some things that kind of came to my mind, but what's different about Morgan? Like, what do you say about your daughter, Morgan? And one of the things that he was talking about is that you have been consistently nurturing your community over on YouTube since 2015. Right. And I look today, congratulations, because you are 10,000, less than 10,000 community
really
away from the Creator Award eligibility. And why am I saying this? Right. Because numbers could be, whatever.
Yeah.
But it is a big deal. And this is why I'm saying, number one, congratulations to you, because that is massive. Right.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah.
Secondly, I want us to unpack consistent nurturing.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
What was like, because you said it, you just mentioned this, right? Like there was a time where you only had a few hundred community members. There was another time where people were like, talk about hair care. You're like, I need to focus on this. What does that look like for you and for these other ladies who are tuning in? What is this conversation around consistently nurturing your community?
I think you can only consistently nurture your community if you consistently nurturing you in your walk with God, though. That's it. Like I always tell women who are in my ministry and everything, I always tell them, my ministry didn't grow until my walk with God grew. There were years I was stagnant. There were years I was putting out content every week and no one was watching it. And it was when my faith grew in God, when I grew as an individual in my personal relationship with God, that's when I started to see elevation within what I was doing. The key here was like, I had to nurture that relationship first and also within. Okay. So even when I was doing YouTube and already uploading content, I was still nurturing that relationship. And I think now the nurturing looks so different than it looked back then, but I just say like, that's the biggest key. And also for me, I knew what I was called to do really early on, like from the beginning almost of this. I knew what I was called to do. And so with that being said, I knew everything, like me getting another job, me moving to another city. that was all just a part of the process, but I knew that was not the destination because I already
Come on.
seen the destination he already showed me the destination. He already spoke to me about the destination. So I knew everything in between was just like, okay, I'll go work at this. I'll be a janitor for the evening and
Come
record
on.
YouTube video content in the daytime. Okay. Like I was fine with that because I knew it was never the destination.
And you have to work the steps, right? That's literally what I hear you saying is this process. You knew that these were experiences that were part of the ultimate plan and goal and assignment that God had for you, right?
Yeah.
And so with that, right, same conversation around consistently nurturing, was there, I know the answer to this now, but was there ever a season where you were trying to move ahead of God to build the vision that God gave you?
Yes,
And I
definitely.
want to say that again for other women who are listening to really hear that question for them too, right? We're having the conversation, but I really want them to consider this too. Was there ever a season where you were trying to move ahead of God to build the vision that God had for you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Yeah,
about
a
that,
lot.
Morgan. Even for you, what was that journey like? What was that season like for you?
I think it was desperation, which is good though. You want to be desperate for God.
Come
I
on.
was so desperate for Jesus that I also was in a situation where I was like living back at my parents' house. I didn't have anything that he was showing me. So it's like,
Oh,
you're showing me all these great big visions, but I'm literally in the same bedroom I grew up with. I'm still just Morgan. There's no one knows about these dreams and gifts inside of me yet. Like
come
I'm just here with it.
so
So
good.
it was a desperation that God, I know what you're saying, but I want to see it now. And so a part of me was like, okay, I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep grinding. And I'm grateful for those seasons that I did kind of go a little ahead of God and try to grind and work so hard, because what it did is it helped me get better at my craft. And also in those seasons when no one was watching me, I was building character. I was learning how to edit. I was learning how to upload and do things. I was learning. So when you guys finally showed up, I was already pretty well at it. So I always say, like, I don't look down on the seasons when I kind of was rushing God a little bit. I actually looked at it as I was so desperate for this thing that he put in my spirit to come to pass. I was desperate for it.
Again, that is so good. Again, I like the kind of the little like nuggets that God gives us along our journeys, right? For in response to what you just shared about acknowledging that there were moments where you did move ahead of God, but you said it developed the character. The way I would look at that for me is it got to a place where I had to look at my situation and I'm like, God, is this a situation where this is a right versus wrong? And he said, no, my sweet daughter, what you're experiencing is what is right versus God's will.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to that place, you'll know because it feels different, right? This is
Yeah.
going to be a conversation as like sinning or what have you, but
Yeah.
we know that when we're doing something that is outside of the will of God, there's really
Come
no
on.
question there. But when
Yeah.
you're like, but God, I thought this is what you told me to do. He's
Mm-hmm.
not going to reprimand you. He's
Mm-hmm.
not going to say, well, and the whole wag your finger at you. You were doing what you thought he
Mm-hmm.
was instructing you to do.
I
And
do.
so to just co-sign with what our sister Morgan Tracy J is sharing, be okay in those seasons, in those moments. Don't drop your
Yeah.
head. You are good.
For real. For
You
real. You're
are
good.
good. You are good. And I know I'm hearing that there's somebody who is going to be listening that they have found themselves in that place so frequently that they thought they were doing what God was instructing them to do, but it was a little bit too soon or it was a little bit too early. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is the woman. If that's you, let us know. But for you, know you are good.
Yeah. Yeah. And
You,
God uses it for your good. Yeah.
yes.
And honestly, I didn't even look at it as I was rushing God. I looked at it like God had me in the hallway a little longer. Like I always call it the hallway. So
Come
I
on.
was trying to get to the destiny. I was trying to get to the end of the
Yeah,
hallway to that open door. And I'm in the hall. I'm like, God, like I'm trying to get there, but he kept me in the hallway to develop me a little
that's
longer,
it.
So even though I'm rushing to get to the door, I'm building this ministry, and I'm believing, and I'm praying, and I'm rushing. I'm like, come on, Jesus. The reality is he set me in the hallway because he knew there were still things I had to develop. And so for me, I never look at it like I rushed God and I was out of God's will. No, because every time I took a step, he led me back right. I never truly stepped out of his will, because even when I failed, and even when I sinned, and even when I backslid, he always put me right back on path, you know? And it reminds me of like a detour. You know how they have like the detours?
Routes,
Like I took a detour, but not realizing the detour route was actually leading me right back on the path I was supposed to be on.
That is so good, right? And this is why I'm so grateful that we're talking about some of the key lessons that you learned, even some of the lessons that I've learned through these experiences, right? Because I would agree, they're shaping us still today. They're molding us still today. And as we continue to grow, as we continue to make impact, as we continue to serve and teach and develop the women that God has called us to lead in our respective ministry context, the beautiful piece is that we too are still learning and growing. We will never get to this place where we have arrived and there's not more for us to learn.
Speak on it.
I think that is what is so freeing for me on this journey, in this conversation, right? Trusting God, trusting the longevity of the process.
Yeah.
There is always more learning to do.
Yeah. It's good. So good.
You know, I want to insert this here. This kind of just dropped in my spirit. You, if I remember correctly, you recently, I don't know how recently, but you recently began seminary.
Yeah, I did about a year ago. Yeah.
What was that kind of process like for you, right? Because you are well-versed with the word, right? You are studying, you have your own personal relationship with God, but you took this step to go the academic route. I want to talk about that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, honestly, from the beginning of even starting my ministry, I knew I wanted to get into seminary. I just knew it. But I never wanted to be ordained. I never wanted to become a minister or a preacher or anything like that. Okay. I actually wanted it just to get better at my craft. And I always say there are some things that when you have the right coach, they can teach you. You know, now, granted, I have the Holy Spirit, I have the Word, I have time, I have God, but there are some powerful theologians out there. There are some powerful revelations I've gotten just sitting in some of my classes. And also, I have an international ministry. And so I can't just believe that what I know nationally is enough. I have to go and study internationally. I have to know international things so that I can impact women internationally as well. Right. And so that right there was a big part of the reason why I went to seminary. And I always said, the reason I'm in seminary is because this is bigger than me.
Come on.
This is bigger than my background. This is bigger than where I grew up. This is bigger than how I articulate things. This is bigger than my personal experiences. Because an experience I had, a girl maybe overseas is looking like I'm blessed and privileged.
Come on.
You know what I mean? So I have to understand that and realize that there was still so much more to learn. And I mean, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
And so seminary has been a breath of fresh air, challenging for sure, though. Not gonna lie. It's been challenging. The Lord knows. But I will always say at the end of the semesters, I am overflowing in a new knowledge that I wouldn't have just got on my own reading the scriptures.
That's it. And that's one thing I think I have heard. I'm going to go there because I'm educated. I believe in education, and I'm currently in my doctor of ministry, focusing on leadership. And I hear people talk about, well, you don't have to go to college and you can do this and you can make, you can do all this and you can run a 7-figure business. And I'm like, that's fine. I was doing that and still educated. And so I want us to, I wanted to make sure to just briefly touch on that element too. If God is calling you to go deeper in academia, pray and pursue. Pray and pursue. Part of the reason I'm sharing this, right? You're hearing from two women right now who decided that this was the route for us. Number one, we believe we heard God tell us, right? That this was our part of our assignment to equip us. Because what I've been realizing, so I started my doctoral journey in 21, and same thing. I'm talking about the pruning process, just completely transforming my mind and what I thought about not just reading scripture and learning scripture for myself, but how to teach others. And so many of the conversations that are happening at the doctoral roundtables are not happening at church. They're not necessarily happening in my friend group outside of the conversations that I bring up, outside of the articles. I'm like, y'all need to read this book. Y'all need to read this article. Did you know, this study is focusing on XYZ? And I continue to hear from my sisters, my team members, my community, that if it weren't for some of the resources that I shared with them, they would have no clue.
Come on.
Stuff was going on. And so I wanted to just co-sign again on what you're saying about, you're leading an international ministry. Same thing. Several of the ladies that we serve are in other countries as well. And if you do not have insight on the women that God has instructed you to lead and serve, there may be some gaps in your assignment.
And there already are gaps because we're different cultures. We're diverse. We're very diverse. We come from different cultures. We have different, the examples I can use may not connect with the girl over there. She don't get that example.
No.
So see, so for me, seminary has opened my mind up to the multicultural ministry. Yes. Not just Morgan's culture, not Morgan, what she grew up in, not her native Black, American culture. But it's like, hey, there's a multicultural ministry out here, and you have to know about this because now your voice is going to these places, and you got to be able to do this and articulate this and get my message across to these people. And sis, if I have given you breath in your lungs, wisdom and understanding, why go at this alone? Why not go to a theologian that has went overseas and has been a missionary for 20 years and that has sat with that women in different cultures? Why not go to that theologian and learn from them because they have the experience, and your audience is all they're doing is feeding off of your experiences. So now you're getting another person's experience, and now you're able to minister on a more effective level.
This is so good. And it's so biblical, Morgan, because what Jesus was doing with the disciples is that he was equipping them. He knew he was going. He knew he was leaving, right? And so he was teaching them the parables. He was teaching them the stories. He was teaching them biblical precepts and principles so that when he was gone, they would be able to carry on these stories. And so as I'm hearing you say this, I feel like that just kind of dropped in my spirit. I'm like, this is why. This is one of the main reasons it is essential to learn from people who have been there, who have done it, who are also acknowledging that they're still learning and growing along the way. Oh, that's so good.
So good. You have to and I can't even imagine saying I'm not doing that. Like, oh, this is where I'm at and there's no need to go further.
Come on.
There's so much more out there to learn about.
That is a perfect segue. How do you pair your faith with being fearless as you're walking out God's assignment for your life?
How do I pair my faith with being fearless? I think that faith is fearlessness, though, because everything you do in faith is scary. You're gonna have faith. You're gonna have fear in anything you do. I don't really go too many days without fear because I'm facing a lot of faith. Yes. I'm stepping out on a lot of faith. So the moment I'm like, oh, I'm really going to do this, or I'm really going to make that email, or I'm going to make this move, their fear hits me because fear is what the enemy sends. Yes. So now fear has hit me. So now I've got to become fearless to move forward. Yes. If I don't limit my fear, then what happens is I'm not going to activate my faith. I'm going to just stay still. And so for me, I learned early on, I did it in 2016. I called it the year of the fearless. The Lord told me this is the year that you're going to be fearless. And I started encountering all kinds of fear. In the beginning of that year, I was like, God, I'm just still standing stuck. And he's like, I need you to feel the fear, but do it anyways. You got to just do it. And so that's what I started doing. Okay, I'm launching a ministry. I'm doing this. Like I felt all of this fear, but fear was not the sign to stop. Fear was the sign to go forward. And so that's where I became fearless. That's where I started teaching these messages to women. Like the moment you feel yourself say, oh my gosh, that's too big, take it on. That's the, oh my gosh, I can't let this guy go. Take it on. Watch what happens. Oh my gosh, I can't go after that thing. I can't get back into school. Take it on, because fear is just a camouflage. It's just camouflaging your blessing, actually. So that's how I've always looked at it.
That is so, so good. And I remember moments like just seeing, I'm listening and I'm like, oh, yep, that showed up here. Oh yeah, go after it anyway. There were seasons of my life where I battled with imposter syndrome. I battled with self-sabotage. We're talking like, raise my hand. I'm an overcoming perfectionist. I'm a recovering workaholic, like you name it.
Come on.
That.
Yeah.
And I remember so many moments I got so close to the line and I was like, no, I can't. And for me, I don't hear people talking about this enough. I was afraid of success. I wasn't afraid of failure. I was afraid of being obedient to God and stepping fully into his assignment for me. I was afraid of commanding the mountain to move, because guess what? I believed that I had the power and authority given to me by Holy Spirit that was alive and active in me, and is still today, that I had the power to command a mountain to move, and I knew it would move. And I was like, I'm not telling that thing to move, because what am I going to do when it moves?
That's good.
For me, I was so terrified, and I was like, yeah, nah, I'm good. But here's the thing, because I feel like this might be something that some other sisters who are tuning in today can resonate with. When you are not operating in your purpose, when you're not walking in obedience to God, you're not just interfering with God's transformative process for your life. You're interfering with the breakthroughs of the women that God has called you to lead and serve.
Yeah, that's good.
That's what got me into action. That's what got me to push past the fear that I was facing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. I want to caveat like on that a little bit. Like,
yeah, go ahead.
Like, because it's like, I think I kind of encountered that too.
Wow.
What made me move? I always used to say, like, now I have to move because there's thousands of people here, you know.
Yeah, right.
But back then I didn't have that.
It
It was just me and my mama. So it's like, what made me move? And I think it was, I wanted to try God. Like, you showed me all this. Let's see if it's real. I wanted to try it. And then when it started to happen, I kind of got scared. Like, there goes the fear of success. Hold on, now I've got to become what? Like, or what am I? You know, I'm just Morgan. I'm just a small town girl. Like, you know, I don't want all this Jesus. I'm just joking. But like, no, really, like it's such an eye-opening experience is when God shows you something and he haunts you with it and he keeps revealing it more and more to you. And you're like, oh, okay. And then it's like, go for it. Let's just see. Let's see if he unfolds this. And like, if he's really God of your life and he's really God and he can move things and do all this for you, if he's showing you that, that might actually be real for you, you know? And that's kind of, I tried God. And I always say that, like, I always try God. If he shows them, I'm like, okay, I'll send the email. I'll do it. I'll set this up. I'll go look at the office. I'll go on an interview. I'll do it. I'm going to try you though. You told me to do, I'm going to try on you.
Girl,
I always try.
All I hear you saying is make the ask, take the step, do the thing that scares you, and watch how God moves.
Girl, I always say, if you do not show up, God can't show out.
Girl,
he can't.
I could run.
He can't. If I never showed up to an interview, he can't show up to give me the job. If I don't show up to look or to schedule an office tour, he can't show up to give me the office. Like, he can't show out for me.
Oh, that's so good.
You got to show up.
Oh my, okay. So I'm pretty sure we can have this conversation for like 2 more hours. And I'm certain that the ladies would love it too, but it is that time. And I want to make sure that as we land this plane, we've been having a definitely timely and a rich conversation, Morgan. If there is one point from our discussion on trusting the longevity of God's process for you, what would you recommend the ladies put in their back pocket?
Ooh, the longevity of God's process for you.
Yeah.
Never leave them. That's it. That's the longevity. It's not about consistency with your craft. It's not about making sure you're always marketing and pouring into your people. No, never leave Jesus. That is going to be that. And if you never leave him, he's always pouring into you. So you don't run out of ideas because you're getting it from him. You're not. And then when you need to rest, he will also get it in your spirit when it's time to get up and get back to work. So it's like never leave Jesus, because that right there is that's what's brought longevity in my ministry, is because I've never left him.
Same.
Even when that's the key. Like, granted, I wanted to sometimes. Granted, I was like, this is too heavy. There's times I wanted to leave the ministry, but I've never wanted to leave Jesus. That's different.
Come on.
There's times I wanted to take the hat off of being this thing, but I never wanted to take the hat off of being his daughter. So the key here, what I want you to put in your pocket, sis, is never leave Jesus. It's okay if you want to leave the ministry or leave the motherhood for a second and leave the responsibilities. But if you have a place where you want to leave Jesus Christ, then there is no longevity there.
None.
Because the very thing that's sustaining you is now going to be gone. And so I will say that, like, that's my biggest takeaway, like tip for the ladies to take away. The only reason my ministry has been what it has been is because I've never left God. Now, I've left the ministry at times and taken a break.
Right.
But I've never wanted to leave Jesus. Never. But that's because I love him. And that's the reality, is when you love something so much, they gonna have to pry that from your bare hands.
Come on.
Okay. Like if there was a mother with their child and someone tried to take their baby, that mom was gonna go to war for their baby.
That's right.
And so that's the same thing with you. When something in your life is happening and it's trying to snatch your faith and snatch your love for Jesus, you gotta know, you gotta go to war with that thing. You ain't taking my God from me. You're not, And so I think that right there is what I would love to leave with the ladies. If you want longevity in anything you're doing, always keep Jesus. You can let the boyfriend go. You can let the money go. You can let the accolades. You can let the subscribers go down. You can let the views cut off. You can take a break, a hiatus, but never leave Jesus. Never take a break from Jesus. Take a break from responsibilities, but don't take a break from Jesus, because he's the one who sustains you.
That is so good. And I want to couple that with this, sisters, is as you're on your journey, if you ever find yourself experiencing burnout, getting overwhelmed, facing anxiety, or even depression, learn how to rest. And I want to give you an acronym. REST stands for reconnect with your source, which is God. Enhance your time in worship. Surrender to God's will for you, and trust the longevity of God's process for you. Ladies, if you have not already done so while we're having this discussion today and you're listening and taking the notes, be sure to run, don't walk, and connect with Morgan Tracy J. All of her details are in the show notes under this episode. Continue to plug in, continue to take the necessary steps, and continue to make a transformative impact in the lives of those you're called to lead and serve. Until next time, ladies, God bless.